Welcome to Talking Heads on USA Global TV, starring the one and only wonderful Dr. Jacqueline. It's a prestigious place where world-class influencers and experts meet, and where you'll find the most trusted advisors and coaches for all things in life and business. Visit usaglobaltv.com to sign up for our newsletter, get the value you need, and be first in line to learn about events and giveaways and other valuable content. Connect with us. Email Dr. Jacqueline at usaglobaltv.com to talk about how you can become part of USA Global TV. That's USA Global TV, where the doctor is always in.
Hello, USA Global TV and radio listeners and friends. My name is Mariska du Preez, and I am here today for our Talking Head show. And I'm so glad to be joining you because we are continuing on building some kingdoms, or otherwise just making sure that our team environments is in such a state that we actually can build thriving teams, because how else will we get to build a kingdom without a thriving team? So, without further ado, we will jump into our lesson for today. So, last time around, we looked at building trust. First of all, we looked at what a team is. Then we looked at building trust. And today we are focusing on healthy conflict. Yes, I know that's the one word that we sort of try to avoid. We hide under rocks, we run away, we do all sorts of weird things in order for us not to have conflict. So we want to make this a little bit of a better space and maybe change the way that we think about conflict in order for us to embrace the gifts that it can give us. So we are starting sort of at the bottom of our pyramid, working our way up to get to having a thriving, high-performing team. And the way that we're doing it is we are working through these 5 different layers. So this is what Lencioni showed us within his dysfunctions of teams. So there's 5 dysfunctions of teams, and we flipped it a little bit. So instead of looking at the dysfunction, we're looking at how to actually function our team properly. And today we are looking at healthy conflict. So teamwork, of course, the one thing I want you to keep in mind whenever you are interacting in any team space, so this is more than just ourselves, is teamwork equals courage plus persistence. So even if the team isn't working perfectly yet, it is a yet. We have courage and we have persistence on our side, and we can make sure that said team works better. So, looking at conflict, I thought we will go back to the roots. And the roots, of course, is in the word itself, the construction of the word. So looking at how this word was constructed. So in Latin, conflict consists of 2 parts of Latin words. So the one is con, which is together, and the other one is fligere, which is to strike. So if we put the 2 of them together, we get a word that sort of morphed over time into conflict, which is to struck together, right? Or alternatively, conflictus, which is also a Latin word, meaning a contest. So we are contesting each other. We are having a contest. Now, if we think about a contest, this can be like a game, right? We have 2 opposing sides and each one wants to win. Or it might be more of a game without any rules, and a little bit more longitudinal, such as in our workplace, and we are all working towards the same outcome because we want the company to hit certain targets and be successful. So that is the context of life, or the context of the environment that we are in. But looking at struck together, now my brain, when we say struck together, I immediately think of building something, because I only want to put two things together, striking them together, when I want to build something. So I'm thinking of maybe two pieces of wood, striking them together, I will build maybe a birdhouse, right? So conflict can be striking two ideas together and building something different, something new can come out of it. So instead of having two pieces of wood that we actually struck together and put them into a new arrangement so that we build something different, we take ideas and do the same thing. So keeping that in the back of our minds, let's look at conflict a little bit more and how this thing called conflict actually comes up, right? So in research done by Christopher Moore, he found that there was 5 main areas normally where conflict sort of starts up. So we've got relationship conflict, data conflict, interest conflict, value conflict, and structural conflict. So let's look at each one of these in a little bit more depth. So when we think about relationship conflict, yeah, we're thinking about miscommunication, we're thinking about strong emotions, we're thinking about stereotyping, and any of the other biases that we might have. Because what a bias normally does is it sort of looks at me being different from that. And it also gives me little blinkers, so I only see the thing that I want to be seeing. So any of those biases can come into play, and then behaviors. We don't always behave at our best, unfortunately, because, well, we are human, and that is part of our journey. We need to learn, and we only learn by making mistakes. So part of that mistake might be not to behave as expected within the environment that we are operating in. So all of these things within relationships can cause us some form of conflict. Then the next one is data conflicts. So data conflicts is really about information, right? So the lack of information, misinformation, not getting different types of information or having opposing sets of information. So all of these sort of things can cause conflict as well, especially when I think the information I have is correct, the other person thinks the information they have is correct, and then we come together and we find that maybe it's not. So instead of looking at the data, we attack each other, which is not the best way to go. So knowing that that is a problem, we then look at the next one, which is interest conflict. So what is interest conflict? Here we have perceptions and actual, right? When we think about interest conflict, it's really about what is the thing that's important to me that this other person, maybe they don't find important, right? There might be a psychological need that I have attached to this thing. So that's why it has importance. There might be other things that's important to me. So finding out what is important to this other person, they might have a bonus that is reliant on them doing something specific. And by them doing that something specific, it is interfering with what I need to get done. So understanding our interest conflicts can become very, very good when we want to try and resolve what it is that we have our conflict around. Then the next one, and this one, it's one of those conflict areas that we seldom think of, and they come up way more often than we think. And this is around value conflict. Now, each one of us have our own personal, individual values, things that we find is important for us. We might need certain things to happen a certain way. We might value certain ways of approaching things, and this creates conflict. Now, there can be evaluation that we're doing around something, and there's some value in there, or it is part of our way of thinking, our ideology, our way of life, right? So all of those things can create conflict, and it creates conflict not only externally, it also creates conflict internally. So this is one of those things that can really be very ingrained in when we're having our conflict situations. And then we have structural conflicts. Now, structural conflicts, what I want you to think about there is it is more about our external environment and the way that it's set up. So is the environment set up in a way where maybe there's a lot of corruption? So if there is a lot of corruption, you have this unequal authority problem, because some people can do stuff that others can't do, right? So you have this tendency of some form of inequality happening. So this is all around environments around us that is impacting on us as human beings. So this is around our structural conflicts. Things that can also be a structural conflict is stuff like time. So I have a specific deadline. I need to get it to it right here. The person that I'm working with, of course, don't have that deadline, or they have a different deadline with a different set of outcomes that they're looking after. And that to them is more important than the one thing that they need to do for me. And of course, then we have conflict. So that is structural conflicts. And the one conflict that isn't in this circle, but permeates all of them, is language. Now, language in our current teams in general is a very, very interesting thing, because we have different cultures coming together. We have people from different areas coming together, even if they are within the same country. And we have all got different backgrounds. So we all have different reference points, which means the way that we think about something and the way that we might use that word, or the picture and ideas that we have combined with that word, as we spoke about in some of our communication chapters, is really very personal. And if I say success, one person might think of success as, well, I am at the top of my company, and the other person might think of success as, I have a happy family. So just as an illustration, words and language within conflict is key. So really understanding where that other person is coming from, and what they mean with the words that they speak. So it's not related to the word and nodding and going, oh yeah, I understand what you're saying. Really understand the meaning behind it. It will definitely help alleviate the conflicts that we can sometimes put our own feet into unnecessarily. So now understanding what conflict looks like and how maybe it can show up within our teams and in our environments. Luke Roberts said, conflict is good in the negotiation process. It's the clash of two ideas, which then, all well, so if we didn't fight too much, right, produces a third idea. And this is exactly what we have with striking together, right? Remember our Latin? We struck it together and we built something new. And this is what we do with conflict. We have one idea, it's my idea, and this other person's idea, and now we strike them together to get something different and something new. And Luke also observed this. So what Liccioni did is he said that there's a continuum for conflict. So we have artificial harmony. It's not really harmony. People sort of everything simmers below the surface, right? And then we have mean-spirited attacks. So on either side of that continuum, we have somewhere in the middle the ideal conflict point. So we do want the stuff that's on the surface, but we also need the things that is below the surface to come up and sort of meet in the middle in order for us to then resolve the conflict. Because if we don't know about it, we can't address it. And if that's the only thing we see, we might miss something. So we need both of them to get there. And somebody that did great work on how to talk when we look at conflicts, and specifically their work is around leadership and how to be more candid in our conversations and our feedback, is Kim Scott. So Kim developed the term radical candor, and I will explain radical candor to you now. So what radical candor is we have not giving a damn or caring personally, and that is shown on our y-axis on this little picture that we have. And then on the x-axis, we have silence, so people not saying anything about it, that below the surface that we mentioned earlier. And then challenging directly, right? So with challenging directly, we can think more of the I'm going to get in your face a little bit more there. But this then, putting these two axes together, actually gives us 4 different quadrants that comes up. So if we look at the silence and not really giving a damn, we have manipulative insincerity. And this is the worst place to be, right? Because 1, we don't care what happens. We don't care about the other people. We don't really care about anything other than ourselves. And we stay silent. So we don't say anything about it. So it's simmering and simmering and simmering and becoming a really horrible way of communicating because, well, we're actually not communicating anything. So definitely, if anything, please stay away from this quadrant as far as possible and focus on any one of the other 3 if we can't get to radical candor. So the next one is obnoxious aggression. So with this one, we don't quite give a damn about anything, but we challenge it directly. So this might look like somebody attacking someone else within a team, although they are not too concerned about the team's health or even maybe necessarily the outcome that the team is working towards. So not ideal. The thing that is positive about this is the fact that at least we know where we stand with this person, right? They are very vocal about it. They will not keep it under wraps. They will actually say something. It's not great the way that they say it, but they said it. It's out in the open. We don't have to wonder about it. We don't have to tiptoe around anything. It's there. It's said. It's not said in the greatest way, but it's said. Then the next one is ruinous empathy. So yeah, the person cares deeply about their team members, and they stay silent. So because they stay silent and they care deeply because they want to see their team succeed, their team will still not succeed because they're not saying anything. If they see something go wrong, they keep quiet. They don't want to get into hurting other people's feelings or making things awkward in the office. So they don't address the elephant in the room, which is also a problem, right? So with ruinous empathy, when we care deeply for another person, by looking at them while they are going to walk off a cliff, technically speaking, the caring is not enough if we keep silent. And this is where radical candor comes in. Because with radical candor, we care about this person. We want to stop them before they walk off the cliff. They might be blindfolded and they cannot even see the cliff. So we need to try and stop them before they get to the cliff and walk off to their own detriment. So we need to say something and we need to challenge it directly. So without tiptoeing around the issue, actually calling a tree in order for them to understand that this is the thing that went wrong and I still do care about you, and that's why I mentioned it. So again, initially I talked about language. For radical candor, language is really, really important because we want to convey that we care about this person and we want to convey the message that there's a cliff that they're going to walk off if they continue the way they are continuing. So making sure that they understand these two elements equally in order for them to then change. Now, to give an illustration of this is while I was in my corporate career, there was an engineer that had a tendency to always think that the way that they did things was the best way, and they went and they did it. And from time to time, we will have to do rework. And it became a really expensive exercise. So I had to have a very difficult conversation with them because we can't go on this way. And I really didn't want them to be moved out or put on a program of some sort. So I had a conversation with them and said to them, hey, I want to make sure that you do your best work because I really care about the work that you do and you are brilliant. However, the way that you are doing it at the moment, the outcomes that we are seeing is not ideal. And they looked at me for a little bit. And then they stood up and left. And I was a little bit shocked because I didn't know what to do. Later that day, I could also see them go quite red in their face. So later that day, they came back into my office. And they said, well, do I really do, is the workmanship that I do really that bad? And I got a few things together so we could go through it together. And as we went through it together, they were like, oh, I never saw this. Thank you for actually telling me. So that is a way of utilizing radical candor. If I left them and if I said nothing because I didn't want to hurt the person, then we would have continued with the same trend. We would not have been able to fix it. And at some point, one of us would have most probably been fired because it would have become a really expensive exercise for the organization. So thinking about radical candor and now having this new idea around what conflict actually stands for, it's building something new and not a fight. I want us to really, really build teams that can collaborate and thrive together and sort out those small little things that might get in the way and trip us up before it becomes too big. And not, well, a cat fight, so to speak. So, seeing as we don't want cat fights, what's the 2 reflection questions that we can think about going forward? What strategies do you normally utilize within your conflict situations? Can you sort of put yourself in one of those 4 quadrants? Where do you normally operate? And then, how would utilizing radical candor change the way that you approach conflict? And this might feel a little bit uncomfortable initially because it is a new skill. It is something that we need to practice. My first time was not great. I could have worked the words a little bit differently. I could have changed it a little bit. But at least trying to develop that skill. So how can you develop your skill to move more towards the radical candor quadrant? And with that is the end of our lesson on healthy conflict today. For you guys to get hold of me, you are more than welcome to visit my website, which is journey2discover.com, or alternatively, feel free to email me, Mariska, Mariska, at journey2, again, the number 2, discover.com, or please connect via LinkedIn. I would love to hear from you and hear what in our lessons you found enlightening and start a conversation. And with that, for today, that is the end of our lesson on healthy conflict at USA Global TV, and we on the Talking Head Show. Until next time, bye.